Today, I'll be taking on a hardcore Nuzlocke of Pokemon Shield using only Dark-type Pokémon. The Dark-type has been a staple of the series since their introduction way back in Gen 2, and in the Galar region of Pokemon Sword and Shield, we get a pretty decent lineup of Dark-types to choose from. But with their weaknesses to common bug, fighting, and fairy types, and many of them having a predisposition to being frail attackers, this run might be a bit more difficult than one would expect. Because on top of having to permanently box a Pokemon when they faint, I can only catch one Dark-type Pokemon per area of the game, I have to play in set mode, I won't be allowed to use healing items in battle, and I cannot level up a Pokemon past the level of a boss trainer's ace by the start of the fight. And for this run in particular, I've decided to add an extra restriction. For the battles against the Gym Leaders and the Champion Cup, I'll be limiting myself to using the same number of Pokemon as my opponent. And on top of having to miss out on a few version exclusive encounters, I'm hoping this will add a degree of difficulty and make things a bit more interesting. None of the Gen 8 starters end up with a secondary type, let alone a Dark type, so it doesn't really matter much who I pick, but I go ahead and pick Grookey, so Hop will pick Sobble. After getting into some shenanigans in the Slumbering Weald, I'm able to grab our true starter of the run, which ends up being a Nickit. I have never once entertained the thought of ever using a Nickit before in any playthrough ever, so yeah, Alfred the Nickit starts us off. Lucky for us, on Route 2, we can immediately find a Dark type who will be much more useful in the long run, a Galarian Zigzagoon who I named Gascoigne. Just to drive the point further, behind Professor Magnolia's house you can find the TM for Payback, which Alfred can't learn. A Dark type that can't learn one of the most basic and ubiquitous Dark type attacks? Wow. Despite that, both Alfred and Gascoigne work together pretty well to easily take care of Hop, and then we're off to the wild area and the long trek to the first gym. In Westlake Axwell, I find a Purloin who I name Adela, then backtracking to the Dapple Grove while it's overcast, we can find Valter the Stunky, who ends up coming with a mixed bag modest nature, but his poison typing will be extremely useful in countering certain threats later on. Then after getting through a couple easy fights against Hop and an orphan with a chip on his shoulder, we find an Evian Route 4 named Simon, who will eventually become an Umbreon later on. Then after Alfred evolves into Thievul, I make a trip to the Isle of Armor DLC, where we can find a couple more encounters to round out the team. In the Soothing Wetlands I find a Zorua wandering around, who I catch and name Patches. Then in the Training Lowlands we can fish up a Carvana, who I name Yusefka. When we return to Turffield, Gascoigne evolves into Linoon during the gym challenge, and then I need to make an important decision. As mentioned before, I'll be using what is considered the anime rule, which limits my team to match the number of Pokemon the gym leader uses. In this case, since we're going up against Milo, I'll be limited to using just 2 Pokemon, so I have to pick carefully. I end up going with Gascoigne and Valter, the latter being especially important thanks to his poison typing being able to counter Milo's grass types. And thanks to our previous trip to the Isle of Armor, I was able to pick up an early Black Sludge to help keep Valter healthy, as well as the TR for Throat Chop, which gives him enough power to hit over half after a weak magical leaf from his Gossifleur. The Black Sludge completely heals back the damage, and then a second Throat Chop easily takes her down. That leaves us with Milo's ace Eldegoss, as we both proceed to Dynamax. The problem is, Valter's only poison-type move is Acid Spray, which ends up having a relatively low base power of 70 when it converts into Max Ooze. Because of that, the first hit barely does a fourth, while a resisted Max Overgrowth does about the same, and sets up the grassy terrain that heals us both. That means that even with the special attack boost, a second Max Ooze isn't even enough to bring Eldegoss down to half, and a third Max Ooze at plus 2 special attacks still isn't enough to get the KO. So after a couple Max Strikes ends up blowing Valter's speed by the time our Dynamax turns in, I'm forced to switch to Gascoigne. Thankfully, he's able to tank some decent damage from a magical leaf coming in, and can easily outspeed Eldegoss on the next turn, and take it down with a Night Slash, and win us our first gym badge. After that, we make a quick return trip to the Isle of Armor, specifically the Pot Bottom Desert, where we can find Amelia the Sandile, who also happens to come with her own cool set of black glasses. Pretty cool. After that, Adela evolves into Liepard, and after another win against Hop, Simon is happy enough to evolve into Umbreon, who also happens to be one of my favorite Pokemon to use in a Nuzlocke. Shortly after that, we're up against our second gym battle against Nessa and her water types. This time it's a standard 3-on-3, starting with Gascoigne against her Goldeen. I went ahead and taught him Seed Bomb, but even with him holding a Miracle Seed, it just barely misses out on the KO. Goldeen uses Agility, meaning it can outspeed on the next turn and hit with a Horn attack, before going down from a Headbutt. Her Aerocuda does manage to go down with a single Seed Bomb, but not before getting off some damage with a Priority Aqua Jet. That means that Gascoigne has to face off against her Ace Dreadnought with a bit less HP than I'm comfortable with. Still, I go ahead and Dynamax, and to be safe I go for a Max Guard on the first turn to block its first Max Geyser. I then click on Max Overgrowth and hope and pray its quad effectiveness will be enough, and not quite. Dreadnought is left just outside of the red, and now Gascoigne needs to survive a Max Geyser, which he does. A lot better than I was expecting too. He manages to hold on, and with another max over... Okay, I don't know how, but we have a speed tie. Dreadnought outspeeds and lands another max geyser, but Gascoigne continues to hang on with just 21 HP. He lets off another max overgrowth, taking Dreadnought down and single-handedly winning us our second gym badge. And after giving Bede and his baby psychic types another beatdown, I proceed to fish up a Corphish in Galar Mine 2, who I name Henrik, and then outside the Modestoke outskirts, I catch a Poniard I name Brador. Both of them will have to wait to join the team, since Henrik doesn't become a dark type until he evolves, and Brador has the chronic case of Unovan evolutionitis, and has to wait until level 52 to evolve, which is literally after the 8th and final gym. So because of these dud encounters, I'm actually in a pretty tricky situation going into our third gym battle against Kabu. His team is comprised of 3 strong fully evolved fire types, and my current team is not the best suited to take them on as they are. The few fully evolved Pokemon I have are not exactly good, and the level cap of 27 is just low enough that a few of my team members that could have had an advantage against him won't be evolved in time to be much use. And with the added rule of restricting my team to 3, I need to be extra careful here. My plan is to start the fight with Amelia the Sandile for one reason and one reason only: Stealth Rock. She sets them up on the first turn after a Rostberry heals a burn from a Will-O-Wisp, then after Ember deals about a third, a dig ends up just barely bringing Ninetales into the red. Amelia ends up getting burned again with another Will-O-Wisp, which causes a Crunch to just barely miss out on the KO, meaning I probably should have just gone for another dig. Either way, she manages to survive another Ember along with the burn damage before another Crunch takes Ninetales down. Arcanine comes out next and loses a fourth of his HP thanks to the Stealth Rocks, while I switch to Simon. He's capable of taking some hits, but after taking a turn to get some leftovers recovery, he ends up getting burned from a Will-O-Wisp as well, and without any other ways of healing at this level, I can't really play Simon too passively now. So I go for Confuse Ray, banking on the chance of Arcanine hurting itself to give us some wiggle room, but he manages to fight through on the first turn, and the Snarl doesn't do much damage. So I decide to bring Gascoigne in a bit earlier than I had planned, hoping again that it'll hit itself to give him a free switch in, but instead he gets nailed with a Flame Wheel, almost bringing him down to half. I risk a crit keeping Gascoigne in, but I have no choice. A Night Slash leaves it with about a fourth, and Arcanine once again fights Confusion, but it uses Agility for some reason. Either way, it's now or never. I go for the early Dynamax, and Arcanine manages to fight Confusion for a fourth time and connect with another Will-O-Wisp. But thanks to inheriting a wide move pool from his Hoennian cousins, I'm able to teach Gascoigne Surf. Despite going off his lower special attack, the conversion to Max Geyser, as well as a held Sea Incense, gives him a slight damage boost. Not only gives Gascoigne a super effective attack option to take Arcanine down, but also sets up the rain to give us another damage boost on top. And when you combine that with Stealth Rocks taking out half of Centiskorch's health coming in, one final Max Geyser is just enough to take it down after Gigantamaxes, winning us our third gym badge by a hair. I'm pretty sure if that didn't take him out then and there, I'd probably be facing a total party wipe. With our third gym victory, the rest of the wild area opens up, and we have a bit of a gap before the next gym battle, giving us a slew of new evolutions and encounters. Amelia evolves into Krokorok right after our fight against Kabu. Then as I arrive at the Modestoke riverbank, it happens to be snowing, meaning I can pick up Ludwig the Sneasel a bit early. Yosefka evolves into Sharpedo, then Henrik can evolve into Crawdaunt and gain the Dark typing to officially join the team. That gives me 2 physically strong water types, right after the Fire Gym. So useful. Next I decide to do something I think is pretty cool. Normally you can't pick up the Razor Claw necessary to evolve Sneasel until later in the game, after you pick up the bike upgrade. But thanks to the Cramomatic on the Isle of Armor, we defeated a specific combination of items to get one right away. Thanks to that, Ludwig can evolve into Weavile, giving my team an early upgrade in firepower. After we do that, Patches evolves into Zoroark, then on Route 6 I can catch myself a Skorupi, who I name Eileen, though she'll have to wait until level 40 before she sheds her bug typing in favor of the dark type. Valter finally evolves to Skuntank, but then I accidentally level up Gascoigne to level 35 when it's still daytime. That's okay, I'll just include him on my team and level up during the gym challenge at night, and then he'll... still not evolve? Okay, so as it turns out, for whatever reason, you can't actually evolve Galarian Linoone into Obstagoon at night unless you're in the wild area. Apparently it's because the day-night cycle only applies to the wild area during the main story. What kind of ass backwards... whatever. It's a little annoying, but since we're going up against Allister and his ghost types, it's not really much of a setback thanks to my team's type advantage. Ludwig leads against his Yamask, and although he ends up missing his first triple axle, he can still take it out in 2 hits on the following turn. I then switch to Simon against Cursula, who fittingly goes for Curse, putting him on a very strict timer. A Snarl on the next turn lowers Cursola's special attack enough that an Ancient Power doesn't do much, which gives Simon an opportunity to stay in one more turn to take Cursola down before he succumbs to the curse. Next up is Mimikyu, so I switch back to Ludwig, who ends up taking a critical hit slash coming in. The first step of the triple axle breaks Mimikyu's disguise, then the next two hits manage to bring it down into the red. But since it just goes for a Hone Claws, Ludwig can easily take it out the next turn with a Poison Jab. Last up is Allister's Gigantamax Gengar, so I bring in Volter, who's capable of resisting pretty much everything it can throw it in. Even a Maxuse can only do about a fourth before Volter Dynamaxes, and after guarding on the first turn to block Gengar's G-Max Terror, a single super effective Max Darkness on the next turn manages to take Gengar down in a single hit. That's badge number 4, acquired in a relatively easy fashion. After that, I take the proper steps to make sure Gascoigne can finally evolve into Obstagoon. Then I make a return trip to the rolling fields in the wild area to pick up a wandering Pangoro, who I name Yuri. Don't worry about the misspelling, I fix it later. And after yet another effortless win against Speed, we move on to the Glimwood Tangle, where I can find an Impidimp who I name Mikolash, who can immediately evolve into Morgrem. And just like that, we're up against our next gym battle against Opal. My team's weakness to fairy types will definitely be at play here, but lucky for me, I have Volter and his poison typing to give us some room to work with. There's not much her Weezing can do damage-wise, thanks to its Fairy Wind being weak and ineffective, along with some healing from his held Black Sludge. After a few flamethrowers, Weezing goes down, and next up is Togekiss. She's a bit more bulky, and can hit decently hard with an Air Slash, so I switch gears and go with a Toxic Venoshock combo, which quickly brings her down into the red, and ends up being far enough that the poison can take her out. Next up is Mawile, and now it's time for Volter to come out. I switch to Gascoigne to tank a Crunch coming in, then use Obstruct on the next turn. Mawile goes for a Draining Kiss, the rare special attacking move that actually makes direct contact, which activates Obstruct's secondary effect of harshly lowering her defense. I then go for Dig while she uses Iron Defense to negate the defense drop, but then we're prompted to answer Opal's quiz. We answer correctly, and Gascoigne receives an attack boost, making the Iron Defense pointless, and that leaves us her Gigantamax Alchemy to deal with. I elect to keep Gascoigne in to Dynamax himself and go for a Max Guard to block her first G-Max finale. Then on the following turn, a Max Strike ends up bringing Alchemy down to a fourth, dealing enough damage that even a super effective G-Max finale can't heal it back. That means another Max Strike is more than enough to take the cake down, winning us our 5th gym badge, despite going up against my team's biggest weakness. After personally witnessing a child abduction, Amelia can fully evolve into Crocodile. Then on Route 7, I find a Morpeko who I name Henrietta. On Route 8, I catch a Volibee with a decent calm nature who I name Ariana. Then Eileen fully evolves into Drapion and can officially join the team. Mikolash also evolves into Grimmsnarl, and at this point we can finally take on Melany and her ice types. The fight starts smoothly with Patches disguised as Simon, taking out her Frostmoth with a single quad-effective flamethrower. And then things get a bit heated. Her Galarian Darmanitan manages to survive another flamethrower in the red, and then an Ice Skull Crash does about the same to Patches. Darmanitan converts into his Zen mode form, but it's no big deal. I keep Patches in and I realize that I have an apparent gap in knowledge regarding Galarian's Darmanitan, because I did not know that it receives a noticeable speed boost when in Zen mode. And as a result of that knowledge gap, I get my very first loss of the run. Not cool. But I have to keep moving on. I send Simon out, who just gets taunted before managing to get the revenge kill with a Snarl. Next up is Ice-Q, and another Snarl doesn't do much damage, but the drop in its special attack already does enough to help reduce the power of an Icy Wind. It sets up the Hail on the next turn, then starts to go for Amnesia to boost its special defense. Combine that with its bottom-out special attack thanks to a third Snarl, we're both doing very little damage to each other at this point. I don't have much patience to drag it on, so I switch to Henrik on a Freeze Dry. Yeah, that was not very smart of me. Even with a -6 special attack, it still manages to deal over a third. Because of that, I'm forced to switch gears again, this time bringing in Gascoigne. I then go for Obstruct to wait out the final turn of Hail, then hit Ice-Q with a Body Press, removing its Ice Face. Luckily, it doesn't set up the Hail again right away, but it does go for another Icy Wind that lowers his speed. That means on the next turn, Ice-Q can reset the Hail before Gascoigne can potentially take it out with another Body Press, causing its Ice Face to reform and block it. But in the end, that only slows us down for a couple turns. After another weak Freeze Dry, we can finally connect with another Body Press to take Ice-Q down. That just leaves us with Melany's Ace Lapras. I switch to Simon as she Gigantamaxes and lets loose a G-Max Resonance. This sets up an Aurora Veil, which has the effect of both Reflect and Light Screen at the same time, so for now, I commit to just waiting out her G-Max turns. And with the Hail out, a Moonlight can only heal a quarter of his HP, but it's still enough to stall out Lapras's next couple of G-Max resonances. Simon survives, the Hail stops, and after Lapras reduces in size, Simon can almost completely heal everything back with another Moonlight, then effortlessly tank an Icy Wind and Ice Beam before finally getting off a Snarl. After that, the Aurora Veil finally goes away, as Lapras misses a Sing and gets her special attack lowered further with another Snarl. This gives Henrik the opportunity to come back out, resist a Surf, Dynamax, and let loose a couple Max Knuckles that take down Lapras, and finally put an end to this drawn-out fight. That's badge number 6 acquired. After yet another effortless win against Hop, we can grab the bike upgrade on Route 9, giving me the opportunity to catch an Inkay, who I name Willem. Problem is, he comes with the Suction Cups ability instead of the much more usable Contrary, so no superpower boost strategy for this run. And it's not really necessary for our next gym battle against our fellow Dark-type specialist Piers. His Scrafty starts off with a Brick Break that does a bit over a third, but a quad-effective Draining Kiss from Mikolash heals him back up while barely missing out on the KO. I try going for a Sucker Punch on the following turn, but Scrafty ends up going for a Sand Attack that lowers his accuracy. I try again, and it goes for another Sand Attack. And of course, when I decide to go for a perfectly accurate False Surrender instead, Scrafty decides to go back to using Brick Break. Of course. Either way, Scrafty goes down, and Obstagoon comes out next. I go for another Draining Kiss, but it of course goes for Obstruct, which triggers the defense drop. I decide to pivot to Amelia, who intimidates, then easily shrugs off a Shadow Claw. An Earthquake only does about a third, but it's probably a good thing, as Obstagoon ends up going for Counter, which brings Amelia down to just 35 HP. So I'm forced to switch again, this time into Yuri, who can outspeed thanks to a Held Choice Scarf, and then take Obstagoon down with a quad-effective Brick Break. Malamar's next, so I bring Mikolash back in to resist a couple foul plays, before healing it all back and then some with a couple Draining Kisses. That just leaves Pierce's Skuntank. I keep Mikolash in to get poisoned by a Toxic, while his Spirit Break does about half. A Screech lowers his defense on the next turn, then after a second Spirit Break ends up rolling low, Mikolash just needs to tank one last Sucker Punch and connect with the final Spirit Break. Skuntank goes down, winning us our 7th badge, and affirming that I am the true Dark-type edgelord in this town. We immediately make our return to Hammerlock, where we have to take on Raihan to earn our final badge. His fight is always tricky due to his Sandstorm team and having to fight in a double battle, and with my self-imposed rule limiting who I can bring into the fight, I have to choose my team very carefully. I ultimately go with these 4, but I can already tell that this is going to be an uphill battle. I start with Gascoigne and Amelia against Raihan's Flygon and Gigalith, as the latter sets up the Sandstorm. I open with Gascoigne obstructing, which blocks Amelia's Earthquake, and while Flygon can dodge it due to Levitate, it does hit Gigalith for over half. It also blocks Flygon's Breaking Swipe and lowers its defense, but Gigalith chooses to target Amelia with a Body Press, dealing some decent damage. Amelia is immediately left with less than half HP, but I keep her in to use Earthquake again, taking out Gigalith at the cost of some friendly fire on Gascoigne. Another Breaking Swipe hits both of my team members and lowers their attack, but a Night Slash from Gascoigne still manages to hit for over half. Sandaconda comes out next to replace Gigalith, as I switch to Amelia out for Mikolash, who isn't affected by another Breaking Swipe. It still hits Gascoigne, so a second Night Slash won't be enough to take Flygon down just yet. Sandaconda goes for inducing paralysis with a Glare, but I made sure to have Mikolash hold a Cherry Berry to clear it up right away. But my current goal is to set things up to take on Raihan's Gigantamax Duraludon as effectively as possible. My plan is to switch Simon in place of Gascoigne, then Dynamax Mikolash right here. He gets hit with a Steel Wing, then Sandaconda goes for Glare again, this time targeting Simon. But thanks to his Synchronize ability, it copies the paralysis right back at it. Mikolash then unleashes a Max Starfall that hits Sandaconda for over half, then dodges another Steel Wing on the next turn. A second Max Starfall takes Sandaconda down, but Simon ends up getting fully paralyzed, leaving Flygon on the field as Duraludon comes out last, and Gigantamaxes. That's not really what I wanted. Simon manages to fight Paralysis on the next turn to land a priority Baby Doll Eyes to initially lower the power of Duraludon's Max Knuckle, then Mikolash uses his last turn of Dynamax to take Flygon out. With that, we're officially in a 2-on-1 scenario, but the win isn't guaranteed just yet. My team is starting to look rough, and Duraludon still has 2 turns of Gigantamax left. Simon continues to fight Paralysis and connect with another Baby Doll Eyes to hopefully give us some breathing room, but a Max Steel Spike is still strong enough to take Mikolash down. This is not good. We still haven't even done any damage to Duraludon at this point. I feel like my only hope is to send out Amelia to Intimidate, then have Simon Protect to avoid her Earthquake. That barely does over a fourth. The attack drop does help, as she barely survives another Max Knuckle on 9 HP, but even after Simon continues to fight Paralysis to keep Duraludon's attack lowered, another Earthquake just isn't enough. Duraludon is left with the 4th, and a body press takes Amelia out as well. Her sacrifice does give Gascoigne the opportunity to finally put this fight away with his own body press, but losing both Amelia and Mikolash is definitely a huge loss. In hindsight, there were probably a few different choices that I could have made, although it's hard to say if the outcome would have been much different. But now that we have all 8 badges in hand, we can finally make our way to Wyndon to compete in the Champion Cup. Before we start the first couple matches, I make a quick trip to the Lake of Outrage in the wild area to grab my final encounter of the run, a Larvitar who I named Gehrman. But he won't be a Dark-type until he fully evolves, so he's not quite ready to join the hunt just yet. First, we have to get through the first 2 tournament matches against our rivals, who have been fairly easy up to this point. We start with Marnie, who, unlike her brother Piers, has a pretty dangerous threat against my team now. I start off with Yuri, who's still holding a Choice Scarf, but Marnie's Liepard can still outspeed and set up with a nasty plot, only to get taken down immediately with a single Drain Punch. Next up is Scrafty, who gets nearly taken out with another Drain Punch, while a Brick Break brings Yuri below half. Marnie then uses her full restore, giving us the chance to heal back most of the damage on the next turn, then takes Scrafty down soon after. Toxicroak is next, so I switch to Ludwig, who just needs to survive a Venoshock before taking it down with a single quad-effective Psycho Cut. I decide to bring in Simon against Morpeko, but a Spark ends up paralyzing. This causes Simon to immediately get fully paralyzed on the next turn, on top of getting tormented. He manages to fight through the following turn to land a Baby Doll Eyes that lowers the damage of a couple more Sparks, then connects with the Snarl to finally get some damage in. We then go through another couple of rounds of Baby Doll Eyes and Snarls until Morpeko can effectively do no damage thanks to Simon's held leftovers. Eventually, we manage to bring Morpeko down below half, and with its reduced attack, I can then bring Eileen in safely. Okay, not so safely. I'm forced to switch again, this time into Ludwig. At this point, I have no choice but to keep risking the possibility of more paralysis. In order to take down Marnie's Gigantamax Grimmsnarl, I need to start setting up with Hone Claws to boost his attack to ensure we can get the one-hit KO, or else we risk getting one-shot ourselves. Lucky for us, Morpeko's next Spark doesn't paralyze, then it just goes for Torment right after that. That does stop our setup, but it's good enough for me. A Brick Break takes Morpeko down, leaving us with probably our most dangerous opponent of the run so far. This guy can and will hit most of my team like a truck thanks to its super effective Stab Fairy type moves. So it all comes down to this. I have Ludwig Dynamax, and all I can do is hope that +2 attack is enough to get us a clean kill. I select Max Hailstorm, and Ludwig pulls through. Grimmsnarl goes down, and I sigh in relief that I won't have to witness what would have happened if that wasn't enough. That's tournament win number 1. Next up is our final fight against Hop. Gascoigne starts off with a body press that brings his double below half, before a quad effective reversal does not so much, before it finally goes down with another body press. Snorlax is next, as I go for an obstruct to first block of Hammer Arm and lower its defense, but even with that, it's not quite enough to take it out. Snorlax manages to survive on nearly a sliver, giving it the chance to connect with another scary Hammer Arm, but Gascoigne just barely holds on. Hop then uses his full restore, but a body press and a Night Slash take it down while getting back a decent chunk of health thanks to his held Shell Bell. Next is Pincurchin, and I switch to Yuri as it goes for a Curse. The boost to its defense enables it to survive an initial Earthquake, but then it gets greedy by going for a second Curse, meaning a second Earthquake on the next turn can take it down without a fuss. But thanks to her Choice Scarf, she's locked into Earthquake going up against Hop's Corviknight, so I switch to Simon who just gets his speed lowered with a Scary Face. A couple of priority Baby Doll Eyes lowers the power of its Drill Pecks, then after getting confused by a Swagger, I switch to Eileen, who has no trouble taking hits, and taking Corviknight down with a few Thunderfangs. Last is Inteleon, so we both Dynamax and exchange max moves that deal just a little over half to each other. I max guard the second turn, but since Inteleon is faster, I'll need to switch on the last turn. Simon, of course, is the perfect answer, tanking another Max Quake with ease. After a decently strong Snipe Shot, the Snarl lowers Inteleon's special attack while doing very little damage due to the special defense boost from the previous Max Quakes. Protecting on the next turn helps Simon get some leftovers recovery, then a Moonlight heals him back to nearly full health. He keeps tanking more Snipe Shots while avoiding critical hits, then after a few more Snarls, Inteleon finally goes down, giving us our second tournament victory. Now that we get a bit of a break from the action, Braydor and Ariana can both finally evolve, and after an awkward elevator ride with Hop, we're forced to fight Chairman Rose's side piece, secretary. I have Ludwig open the fight with a Hone Claws to boost his attack and accuracy, while a Will-O-Wisp-induced burn gets cleared up with a held Lumberry. Unfortunately, I neglected to make sure Ludwig knew a Dark-type move beforehand, so we're left with using Psycho Cut, giving her Frostlass the chance to survive and lower Ludwig's speed with an Icy Wind. A second Psycho Cut does take her down, but now that her Salazzle can outspeed, I need to switch to Henrik. who can manage to tank an Incinerate and Venoshock before connecting with a Crabhammer to get the one-shot. Sarina is next, and I switch to Gascoigne on a Trop Kick that lowers his attack, but thanks to an Obstruct on the next turn harshly lowering Sarina's defense, a Night Slash can manage to deal over half. But then she uses Attract. I don't want to play these love games, so I pivot to Henrietta to resist an Acrobatics, then take her down with a Fire Fang on the next turn. Milotic is next, and while Henrietta can hit her super effectively, I decide to switch to Yuri instead. A Drain Punch just barely doesn't hit for half, but Milotic sets up a Safeguard instead of attacking right away, giving Yuri another free turn to deal some damage. So after Milotic decides to start using Surf, a third Drain Punch can take her down, leaving us with Oleana's Gigantamax Garbodor. I Dynamax Yuri as well, and we exchange Max Quakes, with Yuri's obviously doing some more damage. After a resisted Max Rockfall from Garbodor, another Max Quake is more than enough to take this heap of garbage down. I'm talking about Oleana. She's the garbage heap. I'm pretty sure that's the metaphor they're going for, right? With that nonsense out of the way, we're finally at the endgame gauntlet of battles, starting with Bede. He's been a pushover throughout the game, but now that he switched from Psychic to Fairy types, we have to be a bit more careful. The fight starts easy enough with Walter taking down his Mawile with a single Flamethrower. A Venoshock does some decent damage against his Galarian Rapidash, but I choose to switch him out just in case we'll need him later. I bring in Braidor for his official battle debut to resist a takedown and Dazzling Gleam before taking it down with an Iron Head. Another Iron Head is capable of getting the one-shot against his Gardevoir, but not before she sets up a wish that his Gigantamax Hatterene can make use of. I decide to keep Braidor in and make a huge gamble. Rather than go for a super effective Max Steel Spike, I instead go for a Max Quake to get the special defense boost. Along with his Held Assault Vest, this allows him to survive a super effective Max Flare. I did this on the off chance that a Max Steel Spike wouldn't be enough to take Hatterene down in one hit, which would have left Braidor open. But after the wish takes effect and nearly brings Hatterene back to full HP, I start to wonder if that would have even mattered. Either way, I have no choice but to go for it. Max Steel Spike connects, and Hatterene goes down. It's hard to tell without Calx if my concern was legit, but all's well that ends well. Next up is our rematch against Nessa and her water types. We start with Henrietta blocking Golisopod's first impression with a Protect, then a Thunderfang drops to below half, activating its emergency exit and forcing Nessa to switch to her Seaking. Fearing a strong Mega Horn, I decide to pivot to Yuri. Seaking goes for Aqua Ring instead, but we still appreciate the safe switch in. Seaking does connect with a Mega Horn on the next turn, but a couple Drain Punches are enough to take it down while keeping Yuri relatively healthy. Next up is Pelipper, who sets up the rain coming in. I switch back to Henrietta as it sets up a Tailwind, then protect the next turn in order to wait out the weather. Pelipper does connect with a Water Pulse on the next turn, but Henrietta stays just above half health and connects with a quad effective Thunderfang for the one-hit KO. Golisopod comes back out, and after protecting against its first impression a second time, another Thunderfang gets us another KO, as well as a level up for Henrietta, so she can finally learn her signature move Aura Wheel. Barraskewda is next, so I switch over to Ariana to avoid the incoming Drill Run. She decently tanks a super effective Ice Fang, then retaliates with a strong Foul Play that uses Barraskewda's own attack stat against it, bringing it down to the red. With that, Ariana just needs to survive a second Ice Fang, and can take it out with another Foul Play. That just leaves us with Nessa's Gigantamax Dreadnought. I switch over to Gascoigne on a Max Rockfall that hits for nearly half and sets up the Sandstorm, but despite the strong hit, I keep him into Dynamax. We Max Guard Dreadnought second turn, then thanks to knowing Seed Bomb, we get to unleash a quad effective Max Overgrowth that isn't quite enough for the kill. Because of that, Gascoigne has got to survive a G-Max Stone Surge, which he does. Dreadnaught's Gigantamax ends, and with the final Max Overgrowth, we secure another tournament victory. Next up is the rematch against Allister, but like before, this fight ends up being a breeze. This time, it's all thanks to Henrietta, who finally learned her signature move Aura Wheel. Since she starts off in electric mode, we start the fight by using Protect. She then switches to dark mode, and on the next turn, she can completely annihilate Allister's Dust Noir in a single hit. And thanks to the speed boost, she can proceed to do this for every single one of Allister's Pokemon without fear of being outsped. Even his Gigantamax Gengar gets one-shotted, earning us what is probably our easiest fight in the game, all thanks to this little hamster. With that win under our belts, we're finally at the level cap, which means Gehrman can finally evolve into Tyranitar. This gives my team a major pseudo-legendary boost in power just in time for our rematch against Raihan. Torkoal starts the battle by setting up the sun, so I immediately switch in Gehrman to override it with a Sandstorm. But then Torkoal uses Yawn, so I have to make the choice to keep him in or not. I do, and thankfully a Stone Edge on the next turn manages to not only hit, but also get the crit, taking Torkoal down. He falls asleep, and Raihan sends out Flygon next. I decide to keep Gehrman in case we get the lucky early wake up, but he doesn't. As a result, his held air balloon gets popped after a Dragon Claw, and now he's vulnerable to a super effective Earthquake. I'm not sure what I was thinking, but my mistake ends up not being punished, with Gehrman just barely surviving on 4 HP. I do get my head on straight and switch to Gascoigne on another Earthquake, but after the Sandstorm ends, I go for an Obstruct, forgetting that Raihan will usually prioritize setting up weather. So we miss out on some free damage, and after another pointless turn of obstructing, we finally connect with a Night Slash that doesn't even do half. I switch to Simon as the Sandstorm ends, then go for a couple Baby Doll Eyes before Flygon sets it back up. This lowers the amount his Moonlight can heal, but along with Leftovers recovery, it's still enough to survive Flygon's attacks. After a few more turns of lowering Flygon's attack and staying healthy, Flygon finally runs out of Earthquake PP, meaning it's now safe for Ludwig to come in, boost his attack and accuracy with a couple Hone Claws, then connect with a quad effective Triple Axle to finally take Flygon down. Now we're finally back on track. A couple more Triple Axles easily dispatch Turtonator and Goodra, and with that we're finally left with his ace Duraludon. But once again, I end up making another sloppy play. Duraludon Gigantamaxes, but I decide to keep Ludwig undynamaxed. For some reason I was convinced that even a neutral hitting Triple Axle would be enough to take it down thanks to his doubled attack, but it only manages to deal about 2/3, and because of that, a Max Knuckle ends up taking Ludwig down. I convinced myself that Duraludon is just too hard to switch into safely, but I still feel like this is a huge blunder on my part. At the very least, I can send Henrik in to Dynamax safely. I have a Max Scar Duraludon second turn as a precaution, then after surviving another Max Knuckle, a Max Darkness ends up being enough to take it down. With that, we finally obtain our final tournament win, but at the cost of another team member. Before we could take on the champion, Rose decides to CEO his way out of a problem he caused himself, so it's time to teach him a lesson. I start with Walter roasting his lead as Scavalier with Flamethrower, but the fact that it takes 2 to take it down despite it being quad effective has me a little concerned. His Kling Klang is able to outspeed and deal about 1/3 with a Wild Charge, so after another Flamethrower, I take a turn to protect and get some Black Sludge recovery. A second Wild Charge brings Vulture down to about half before another Flamethrower takes it out. Ferrothorn is next, and we take another turn to protect and get recovery while it boosts its physical stats with Curse. Then, after another quad-effective Flamethrower yet again fails to get us a KO, Ferrothorn gets the opportunity to hit back hard with a boosted Gyro Ball, taking Vulture out. At the very least, his Aftermath ability does give us a mutual kill, but it's definitely disappointing to lose him here. I send out Yuri to take on Berserker, who uses a Screech to lower her defense after a Drain Punch brings it into the red. Due to the defense drop, I have to pivot over to Gascoigne, who tanks an Iron Head coming in, then a Body Press takes it down on the next turn, and with that, we're down to Rose's Copperajah. We both Dynamax, and a Max Knuckle only manages to do about 1/3, while a G-Max Steel Surge brings Gascoigne down below half. I use a Max Guard on our second turn, then I make the switch back to Yuri. Between the Steel Shards left behind by Copperajah and a Max Quake, she's immediately brought down below half, but a Drain Punch on the following turn is enough to get the kill and the win against who I personally consider the worst written villain in the series. Afterwards, we have no trouble banding together to take down one of the Great Ones and save the Galar region from a vaguely described apocalypse. And like that, we're down to the final fight against the champion, Leon. My team has suffered from some missteps and questionable decisions I made throughout the run, but I'm confident that the team I'm left with can end this run strong. We start the fight with Gascoigne using Obstruct, which blocks the Sacred Sword, but most importantly draws his Aegislash into its blade form. With that, a single Night Slash is enough to get the one-hit KO on the next turn. Seismitoad is next, and after another Obstruct lowers its defense, a quad-effective Seed Bomb gives us another easy KO. We use the same strategy against Haxorus after a strong Outrage brings him down below half, but this time I can make use of Obstagoon's Reckless ability by going for a Stab Double Edge. The boost in power guarantees yet another KO as Gascoigne is brought down to a 4th from the recoil. I initially keep him in to get off one last Obstruct against Cinderace, but since he uses Pyro Ball, which isn't a contact move, we don't get the defense drop. I finally switch him out for Henrik, who can take another Pyro Ball and an Acrobatics before giving us yet another one-hit KO with a Crab Hammer. We're doing great so far, but we're not out of the woods yet. Dragapult is next, and it's capable of hitting hard and fast, so I switch to our trusty tank, Simon. He gets hit with a Dragon Breath coming in, then ends up getting burned from a Flamethrower on the next turn. But thanks to Synchronize, the burn gets immediately passed back onto Dragapult. A Snarl ends up getting a critical hit, then a Moonlight brings it back up to full HP. We do end up missing the next Snarl, but at this point there's officially nothing Dragapult can do anyway. I switch to Yuri, and then Leon uses a full restore. Whoops. But it's not a huge setback, as I could just switch to Gehrman, who sets up a Sandstorm, and with a special defense boost, barely gets a tickle from a flamethrower coming in. And after Dragapult goes for a last-ditch Thunderbolt, a single crunch takes it out. And just like that, we're finally down to Leon's Gigantamax Charizard. I Dynamax Gehrman as well, and after taking a Max Overgrowth, a single, quad-effective Max Rockfall is all that it takes to bring him down. And with that, the final battle is won. I have officially beaten a hardcore Nuzlocke of Pokemon Shield using only Dark-type Pokemon. There were definitely some tough matchups throughout this run, more than I initially realized thanks to everyone and their uncle packing a fighting-type move, but making it to the end is all that really matters. My MVP of the run is without a doubt Gascoigne the Obstagoon. On top of being available from the start, he managed to help secure multiple wins throughout the run thanks to his wide move pool, good stats where it matters, and a signature move designed to help tip battles in our favor. His normal dark typing was hard to work around at times, but when it mattered, Gascoigne helped us pull through. If you ever do a run of Sword and Shield, don't sleep on Obstagoon for these reasons. So once again, if you enjoyed this run, please don't hesitate to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments what kind of challenges you'd be interested in seeing, or feel free to let me know what your favorite dark type is. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.